Hello. Do you find yourself needing to conduct online interviews and observations? Well, I'm Carrie Stevens, and I'm one of the researchers on our paper at HICSS. And I'm here today to share with you some tips about how to do that, as well as some of the theories that we use to guide our decision making and some of the challenges that we faced when we interviewed 15 different participants over 3 time periods to collect data in the summer of 2020. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see my slides. And this study was funded by the National Science Foundation. And I have colleagues who were at George Mason, as well as Brigham Young University, who participated in this study. And I certainly can't forget the amazing volunteers that we had, our community emergency response volunteers and their manager who helped make this all possible. So, overview of the project. What we were really interested in doing is learning more about how human AI teaming is happening. And so our participants would log in to an online annotating tool, and we watched them, we observed them, and then we asked them about their decision-making processes and their attitudes toward the AI that they were interacting with. Our content was focused on COVID-19, and they were coding tweets related to whether they were related to prevention of COVID-19 or risks of COVID-19. So the key contributions are really threefold. First of all, we wanted to provide a theory-based set of recommendations for how to conduct online interviews and observations. Second, we want to share some of the prior research that's been done that really did guide our approach to this project, but then also identify gaps that we were able to fill. And then finally, demonstrate the value of using theories like Hughes filtered out and surveillance to better understand the online interviewing and observation methodological processes. So past research. The key resource that we found out there was the SAGE Handbook of Online Research Methods, published pretty recently, 2017. It really does focus on online interviewing. Now, they divide it into 2 main categories, which is synchronous and asynchronous, like we would probably expect. Synchronous, they talk a lot about instant messaging, using instant messaging, and phone calls. Asynchronous was a lot more about email exchanges and a focus primarily on interviewing. Now, there's also some discussion of video, and like you might suspect, Skype was the primary platform that has been published and discussed, but I have a feeling that's going to really be changing now that we have all spent our lives online, essentially during 2020 with COVID-19. The real gap that we found in, and we review a lot more literature in the paper, so feel free to take a look at that. The real gap we found was that not many people have looked at online observations, and we could find nothing on screen sharing. So we did this complex qualitative data collection process that was 100% online. The theories that we used to guide this, first of all, have to do with cues. And what we found is that it was harder to build rapport. And these theories would also say that, especially the hyperpersonal model, that the key to building a better relationship with people is to have multiple interactions over time. So we did that. The second theoretical base that we used had to do with surveillance and observations. And the panoptic effects really tend to occur whenever people are watched, but they don't know who is watching them. So we were very conscientious about always sharing our video, always making sure that they knew that we were there, and also being supportive and understanding of the fact that it takes a lot of technology competence to be able to screen share, manage all these things, and be observed on top of that. Our participants, like I mentioned earlier, we had 15 volunteers. We interviewed them 3 separate times. Over 45 hours of data were collected. And these people had various different backgrounds. Some of them were emergency response experts. Others, actually we had 2 who were really expert in using artificial intelligence. We use Zoom as well as specialized software called Citizen Helper, designed by one of the PIs on this project, where the people annotated these tweets. And then we analyzed and transcribed our video and used a constant comparative analysis to do that. So our first research question had to do with challenges, and we definitely identified some key challenges. But I'm going to hit these fairly quickly so we can focus instead on what our recommendations were. First of all, there were so many technical issues. As a matter of fact, one of the more surprising one was that the version of Zoom that I'm using may not be the same one that our participants are using. And so we often found ourselves having to reconcile very minor little differences between the same technology tool. But we also found that our participants weren't necessarily competent with the technology tools that they were using. Some of them would jump back and forth between iPads and laptop computers. You know, we had one person who was doing the annotation, I believe, on her phone. And so we had to really overcome those. We also had rapport building challenges. I'll talk about how we overcame those. There were distractions in both the researchers' environment, we're working out of our homes, as well as the participants' environments. And then one of the challenges we had was, how do you provide feedback that encourages people in this environment, but doesn't skew the results of their annotation task? So key recommendations, first of all, you really do need 2 researchers, because one of those people is going to be serving as your help desk. We also found that you can create your interview guide and all of your informed consent documents in a way that really helps people conduct these online interviews and observations. We have some key features that we found that could protect privacy. And then finally, we really thought a lot about our audience. We thought about their scheduling needs, as well as how to help them screen share a little better. We were help desk. Oh my gosh, we were help desk in a lot of different situations, and that's not necessarily what we expected. So we found the value of having 2 researchers being absolutely essential. Other things is there's more opportunity to build rapport. For example, we had a faculty member and a graduate student on almost all of the interviews, and the participants really wanted to talk to the graduate students. I think they felt they wanted to know where they were in their programs, and this provided us incredible opportunities to build a rapport. The primary researchers, the person who asks the questions, is paying close attention to the annotating tasks so that they can interrupt and ask people to share their decision-making processes. The secondary person is there taking screenshots, notes, and serving as that very needed technology troubleshooter. Here's an example of what a screen would look like with 2 of our researchers. And I'll tell you what that 17 is down there a little bit later. So let's talk about how that interview schedule can actually guide people into proactively conducting these online interviews. You're going to notice that in my interview guide, there are prep tips. I also recommend that people print out their interview guides so that it's one less screen to try to manage. Encourage that casual chat at the beginning, and then start your recording after you have gone through all of the introductory material. So specifically, one of the reasons you want to do that was that 17 on the bottom. It's really awesome because you can go in, and on Zoom in particular, you can rename your participants. So we renamed the person and number. It also allows them to screen share, and sometimes they would turn off their videos during that, but a lot of times they turned it on. We also found we needed to be very sensitive to our participants' needs. I mean, they were in their homes, right? We saw everything on their screens. If they had notifications pop up, maybe they had their email open, we had to really encourage them to make sure that they didn't dwell on any of that. And then we had to remove that also from our recorded documents. We experienced unstable internet connections, and surprisingly, because we weren't co-located, there were a lot of weather challenges that we had to deal with. We were in multiple locations, but our participants were in Washington, D.C. area, and they seemed to have a lot of storms this past summer. Another thing we found to do that helps is make scheduling as easy on your participants as possible. We used Calendarly, and it took care of our time zones. And be aware that because people are working out of their homes and this is online, we had a lot of people schedule evenings and weekends to conduct these interviews. Here's an example of how we structured our informed consent documents. We had this screen up and ready to go so that you could share it, have people read through it. You're going to have to scroll through the document. Be sensitive to the fact that some people may need you to enlarge the text. This could have to do with eyesight issues, but it also could have to do with the device that they're looking at this informed consent on. And then you can email them a copy for their records afterwards. So I really hope that you found this a helpful guide to our paper. A couple of other things to be aware of is that there are links in our paper that will direct you to some very brief overview videos, 2 minutes or less, where you can learn about a couple of key tips that I shared with you today and that you can also share with others. I'm going to stop my screen. And what I'd like to do at this is say thank you for listening. We hope you found this, our paper, enticing and also exciting. And maybe it'll help you the next time you find yourself needing to conduct online interviews. Thank you so much.